that is called quantum entanglement. Quantum entanglement is a phenomenon we find in nature. It's a kind of a bizarre phenomenon. I mean, it's counterintuitive. It doesn't make any sense, but it is a phenomenon where we find that two things that are, say, two subatomic particles that are part of one thing, even if they're separated by billions of light years away of space, if you change or induce a certain action in one, the other one will have a similar reaction. This is why it's called spooky action in the distance. It seemed to be a very non-local phenomenon where one thing is, when two things are connected on a subatomic level, two things are unified as one. Even when you split them apart, they're always deeply connected. Not only deeply connected, but the actions of one affect the other, and the action of the other affects the other. So this is an excellent analogy to something that is relevant in our lives in terms of obviously, so the idea of loving your fellow neighbor, and Achdus Yisrael, unity of Klal Yisrael, unity of the people of Israel, the idea of oneness. To understand this concept of quantum entanglement. So let's try to unpack this. We find this in many different places, but let's give you one example of this idea and how it really can affect our life, and it should impact our life in a very powerful way. With regards to the menorah, in the Beis Hamikdash, the menorah, which is the candelabra, so the menorah is made out of miksha achas. It's meant to be formed from one piece of gold. It's not the way it was created. Now, technically, in a place where it couldn't be afforded, you were in the times of Beis Hamikdash, you can also make a menorah shel eitz, like they did with the Chashmonaim or Shpudim. It's possible, but when you did the menorah in the correct way, when they lit the menorah, the candelabra in the temple, the Beis Hamikdash in the correct way, it had to be a miksha achas. It had to be pounded from one piece of gold. And then it divided itself into seven branches of the menorah. The image of the menorah, the image of the candelabra in the Beis Hamikdash, is like the Nevuah Yecheskel, the Nevuah Zechariah, which is the Nevuah that we speak, which we read in the Parsha Baloischa, which talks about I see the menorah Zav, I see this golden menorah, which Yeshua Kohen Gadol sees, and the menorah represents Klal Yisrael, or represents the entire people of Israel, all of Klal Yisrael. That there are, like the Alter Rebbe explains in Parshas Baloischa, that there are seven branches of the menorah. The seven branches of the menorah is really, in its essence, in its core, it's a miksha achatz. It's one piece. It's one piece of gold, but it flows into seven different directions, and the seven different directions correspond to the seven midos, the seven attributes of Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Yisoy, Malchus. Chesed is giving, and Gevurah is restricting, and Tiferes is harmony, and Netzach is confidence or power, and Hod is humility, and Yisoy is connection, and Malchus is receptivity. So these seven qualities, which is generally the seven qualities of people, correspond to the seven types of people, seven types of people in Klal Yisrael, which correspondingly, in a greater form, corresponds to the 70, which is the 70 people that entered Aboy Mitzrayim, that became a nation of people when the number 70 was reached, which corresponds obviously to the 70 nations. So 7 is the essential types of people, correspondingly also, of course, to the 7 days of the week, like the Ramban writes in the beginning of his commentary to Bereshis. So every single day has another quality, and there are people who have certain qualities. Some have chesed more dominantly, some people are more giving and open, expansive, extroverted, and some people are more introverted, and some people more restrictive, and so forth, disciplinarian. There's different types of qualities of people. But the source of all the seven, says it has to be a miksha achas. It's created from one piece of gold. So the Alter Rebbe explains this idea in depth, and then he writes like this: that the main thing is ha'ikar shetzarich li is achdus gomer. that there should be unity, because we come from a place of unity. We come from a place of miksha achas, one piece of gold. And then he says that l'pa'amim, sometimes you do a positive mitzvah, you do something positive in this world, and you should know that that comes from someone that you think is a negative person or a sinner, a negative person, and you receive that from the other person. And same thing also, the flip side of that, he says, that when you see a default in character, you have to say that is a reflection. This is not the flip, this is the same idea. That sometimes when you see a chisar within yourself, a defect of character within yourself, you have to say that's my responsibility, something that I did. And but if you see something good within yourself, it's possible that the good within yourself, the good character trait, the good actions that you're doing in this world, is inspired by another person. So, in a very, very general sense, what he's saying is that sometimes a person feels himself that they're very charitable, let's say. They feel very good about being charitable, and they see another person that seems to be more miserly and someone that's less charitable, and they immediately judge them. So besides the fact that they shouldn't judge them, but let's say they immediately judge them, and they say this person is a miser, this person is not charitable. Comes along the Alter Rebbe and says that it's possible that the reason why you're charitable is because you received something from somebody else and that affected you to become charitable, and the fact that this is the reverse, and the fact that the other person is not necessarily so charitable and more miserly is perhaps because of you. What does that actually mean? What does it actually mean? So this goes back to a teaching really that's found in the Gemara, where the Gemara says in Chagiga, Tezvav, that sometimes a tzaddik is noitel chalke v'chalke chaverin b'ganein. Sometimes a tzaddik receives his portion, the portion of his friend, in a state of paradise. Sometimes a rasha lo zacha noitel chalke v'chalke chaverin b'ganein. Sometimes a rasha is the opposite. Someone that's wicked receives that in Gehenna. And the idea is fully more unpacked in the teachings of the Ari. The Arizal writes in Priyatz Chaim, Sha'ar Hamida, when it talks of Ala Tzadikim, the Arizal writes that it's possible that sometimes there is a person that does a positive act, and they did something, a positive act, let's say they give charity. It's possible that sometimes a person, it's a mitzvah. So a mitzvah could be a sin, an opposite of a mitzvah can cancel out the mitzvah itself. Not cancel out the mitzvah itself, but the schar mitzvah, the reward of mitzvah. But the reward was created. A person does something positive in this world. When you do something positive in this world, let's say you do give charity, that's just a colloquial example of giving charity, you do a mitzvah, you create positivity in this world. Therefore, there's a cause and effect, which means that you receive the positivity that you created. There's an effect. There's a sibu mesuv, and you receive it. Now, if you do a positive action, and then an hour later, 2 hours later, a day later, 3 hours later, you did something, God forbid, that's something that's very terrible, the opposite of the action of something that's charitable. Now, the schar, the reward, or the effects of that positive deed that you did before is eternal. It cannot disappear. Right? It can be in the language of Chazal. The Gemara talks about this difference between a Torah and a mitzvah. And the Gemara in Sotah Chafalv is the difference that it's mechaba, that it lashes out, it extinguishes the mitzvah, but the schar of the mitzvah itself doesn't actually become extinguished. It still exists because it's the world of eternity. A positive action exists within the world of eternity. It's by definition, it's an eternal act, like the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya Chafei. So since it's an eternal act, its reward is eternal. But what happens is if a person does something negative, such a terrible negative thing that overwhelms the positive thing that they did 3 days ago or a month ago, then the schar, the reward of that positive thing, the effect of that positive action is now transformed and transposed into another person, to a tzaddik. There's, let's say, a tzaddik, another person, a righteous person, that did a similar act and has similar energetic qualities like the other person that did the previous act. and that person can no longer receive the reward, it's possible that the effects, the reward of that previous action of the quote-unquote wicked person now enters into the righteous person. And the righteous person now holds that reward for himself. That's Zachav v'chelke v'chelke chaver. He receives his portion, the portion of his fellow. That's a possibility. And the Ari says that this is some of the things, intentions that we should have when we're saying Al Tzadikim Simcha Imam, that we should have intention that things that are lost because of things that are inactions or are negative actions that may have canceled out or extinguished our positive actions should be returned to us. But what this is saying is, on a very deep level, is as follows: that we are all one miksha achas. We're all one entity. All neshamas, all souls, are rooted within the soul of Adam Kadmon, the primordial man, Adam Kadmon, and all souls are created yechidi. Now, when Adam was created yechidi, a singularity, and Adam was created as a singularity, it means that all our souls are rooted in that place of a singularity as one existence. This is before the Chet Eitzadas, before the eating from the tree of knowledge, is the world of separation. They existed within the world of unity, and all the souls existed as a unified form, as one, a miksha achas. Then afterwards, there was a breaking apart of Adam Kadmon. There's a breaking apart of the primordial man, so to speak, like in a metaphor that would be there was a picture, and then the picture became pixelated into parts, like parts of a puzzle, and each soul receives a particular spark of that soul. But in essence, we're all one. And because we're all one, this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying, because we're all one, our actions affect our fellow, and our fellow's actions affect us. If we notice ourselves, hopefully, that we're having positive thoughts, positive feelings, and then that affects us in a way that we have positive actions. One way to say it, which would be the more arrogant way, is it's because of my free choice. And that's, on some level, of course, that's true. But the other way to seeing it from a miksha achas, from a point of oneness, of what we'll call this quantum entanglement, what that means is the reason why I'm having these positive thoughts is because of another person, possibly. It's possibly that my entanglement with other people is because energetically we're connected as a miksha achas, and certainly people that we're even specifically connected with other people, it's possible that we're picking up other people's thoughts, other people's feelings, and that's engendering us to do certain particular actions. So the toiv, like the Alter Rebbe says, sometimes the toiv of the self, the goodness which we find within ourselves, is actually mechaver, comes from another person. And then the other side is if you see a defect of character within another person. Not that you should, but let's say you do see, and you see faults in another person, it's possible that those faults within the other person, the reason a person is having negative thoughts and negative feelings, and therefore negative faults in their action and how they're acting in this world, is engendered and inspired by your own thoughts. That maybe you just had the thought to do something negative, that thought was transposed to the other person, and now the other person acted on that thought. But the root of the thought to do something negative is actually coming from you. So you can always look at life and your interactions with other people and see it as a separation. I'm a good person, that person is a lousy person. Whether you do this judgment or not, that's not relevant, and it's not a good thing. But if you did this judgment and say, I'm trying my best, I'm doing the right thing, this other person is not doing it, and certainly in different contexts of life, you may be saying this. And the other way of saying is, the truth is, if I look at another person and they're struggling, maybe the struggle comes because of me. And if I look at the goodness and my good qualities I found within myself, it could be because of me. The ills of another person, the failures of another person could be from myself, a reflection of me, and the positivity of the other person could be actually, or the positivity within me can actually be inspired by another people. And this is what we say, that it's a miksha achas, mirecha ad pircha, from yirecha ad pircha, from the stem until the flower. In the menorah, there was the stem, there was the basics, there was the foundation of it, and then there was the beautiful flowers, the ornaments that existed on top of the menorah. So the pasuk says, the verse says, "Mirecha pircha miksha achas." From the miksha achas, we're all one, from the yirecha to the parchim, from the yirecha to the parchim, from the stem to the flower. They're all part of one beautiful flower. and one is affecting the other, both for positive and for negative. And the healthy way of looking at it is you see the negative within another person and say that it comes from me, therefore I have to correct myself. If I see someone struggling negatively in a certain type of failure of character, I have to ask myself, what is it within me that if I had better thoughts or purer thoughts or holier thoughts will create a better world around me that people will respond in a better way? And that's taking agency and responsibility for the world around us as much as we can. If you can fix it, you can fix it. But if you can't fix it, at least you can fix yourself. And if you say if the reason why people are having these negative thoughts or acting a certain way or in a very bizarre or unhealthy way, what is it within me, my character, within my own thoughts, within my own mind, within my own consciousness that is allowing for the possibility of such thoughts to exist within other people? And to understand, because there's a miksha achas, it's one piece of gold, it's one entity, and therefore my thoughts affect the other person and therefore affects their behavior. And then when you see the goodness within another person, within yourself, and you should recognize the goodness within yourself, and certainly if you did something positive in this world, of course, give yourself credit. That's not, the idea is not to bash yourself, but also say that the reason why I can do these positive things in this world and have these positive thoughts is because of the people around me, because they're giving me positive thoughts and giving me healthy, holy thoughts, which allows me to be a better person. So always take responsibility for yourself and responsibility for the world around us, because the world around us is a part of us. Everything that we're seeing in our screen, everything that is being observed in our own life is a part of our life. It's not just only that it's hashgacha pratis, that it's divine providence, that it was shown to you to tell you something about yourself, that you're seeing a mirror, that you see the world as a mirror, a reflection of yourself that's reflecting back to you what you should be doing about your own self. But on even a deeper level, it actually is coming from you. It's not only mirroring back to you own defect that you find within your own character. So you see a character trait, a flaw with another person, and then you immediately ask the question, like the Baal Shem Tov says, is what does it come from me? What is it mirroring back into my own self that I'm seeing it? Because you don't see things the way they are, but the way you are. And then the deeper question is, not only is it mirroring back to me who I really am, but maybe it comes from me. The fact that I see this in another person is actually rooted within my own consciousness, and therefore I have to take responsibility and agency for whatever I see in this world. Hashem should help us that we should live this way and truly take responsibility. And that's the way that's the level of tshuva, of true returning to Hashem.